Have you ever noticed that if you ask 10 people what corporate diversity and inclusion means, you'll get 10 different answers? We invite you to join us for the Inclusion Score podcast as we discuss the standardization of corporate diversity and inclusion. I'm Karen Prater-Jasmine, Chief Data Officer at Inclusion Score.
And I'm James Felton Keith, CEO at Inclusion Score. We'll meet with leading experts, academics, diplomats, and business people about how to methodologically deliver corporate inclusivity across your organization's governance, HR, product delivery, and supplier diversity. Let's focus on getting D&I right, because if you've worked where we've worked over the years, you know that a bad system beats good intentions any day.
WHCR 90.3 FM, New York.
Good afternoon. My name is Ama Agyapong. I am the founder of Inclusion Enterprises, but I go by That Inclusion Lady on most social media platforms. And I talk all things inclusion. But one thing I'm really excited about today is to chat with Carla, because I am also a certified EEOC investigator. And one of the reasons I did that was so I can reverse engineer where do these behaviors end up. Right? So now that people are litigating more and more because EEOC claims have increased, what could we have done to prevent that? And how can I teach that to leaders? So I look forward to chatting with you, Carla, because we are going to dissect this thing as to some things we could have prevented, right? So enough of me, tossing it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. So tell us, let's start off with, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. I am a wife. I'm a mom of an 11-year-old daughter, Camille. Camille is 11 now. Right before she was 3, she was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. We moved from New Jersey when she was about 18 months, and we started noticing that she was no longer using her words. Took us about 3 evaluations, and we eventually got the diagnosis that she was autistic. Took some time away from work and just, started with the therapies and doing all that we normally would do. Started working for this organization. Things were going really well, really well. Then I got a new manager. Y'all. And she started just being difficult. She started wanting to know all of my daughter's doctor's appointments, and I'd been there probably almost 3 years, and she wanted 6 months of my daughter's doctor's appointments. Can I get your daughter's next 6 months doctor's appointments? Now, mind you, I'm a contracts professional, so I worked in the legal department with all the legal professionals. I worked with attorneys. I worked with the employment attorney. I wrote all the severance agreements with the employment attorney. So I saw what we were paying in severance agreements. I saw I saw everything that we were doing and what we should have been doing and should not have been doing. So I was kind of aware of the good and bad practices that were happening in my department. So I was taking note for about 3 years. So I was just filing it away in the back of my head in the event I ever needed to use this information. So when I saw this become an issue for me, I just acted accordingly.
So I would love to break this down a little bit more. You said you got a new manager, and the manager was difficult, and so we heard the words that the manager used, but what were some of the actions that made you perceive this person as difficult?
Well, she started off, it started off probably 3 months prior. My mother had been diagnosed with breast cancer. 6 months prior, I'd been taking my mother to treatment. My mother subsequently passed away of breast cancer. My previous manager had no issue with me taking my mother to treatment. 2 days, I was working from home, 2 days, and then back in the office. My mother passed, and then she told me, we really don't have a work from home policy. He probably shouldn't have been letting you do that. Just being difficult, just being, I'm seeing this trend of just being difficult. So then it was, I need your daughter 6 months, your next 6 months doctor's appointment. So I said, well, I don't really need to give you her next 6 months doctor's appointment, because I knew my rights as a professional. I'm not giving you my daughter's 6 months doctor's appointment. I just don't have to do that. So I went and applied for intermittent leave. Got approved, and the next week she just called me in and said, well, I know you need to take some time for your daughter. We're just going to go ahead and give you 6 months severance pay, and we'll go ahead and let you take some time for your daughter.
Whoa, hold on. So as you all are learning about this story, so am I. Wow. Okay. So up until from we need the next 6 months. Clearly, she likes this 6 month time frame, but we need 6 months of doctor's notes too. We're just going to, like, she's doing you the favor. We're just going to give you 6 months severance. Were there any other activities or actions or comments or anything like that that happened in between those two things?
It happened literally like in a week's time.
Oh.
Yeah, in a week's time. It happened just that fast.
So as an investigator, one of the questions that we would ask in the investigation is, did you give this person time, right, to change the behavior? And so 1 week.
Yeah, it literally happened in 1 week.
Wow. Okay, so then what happened next? You said no to the 6 months doctors, because who knows that, right? Typically, it's determined on the doctor's visit if you're going to have another one, when, all of those things. So you did that, then you got the 6 month severance. So then what happened next?
Well, she brought me in with. I came to work, and she brought me in with HR. Well, they called me into a conference room. She brought me in with HR, and they said, well, we want to offer you 6 months severance to go take care of your daughter and do what you need to do. And I said, well, and I immediately said, well, this wouldn't be because I filed for intermittent leave, would it be? And I'm not signing this. And I just picked up my purse and walked out. And that was that.
Did HR get involved at all? Like, was HR tracking the leave you had used previously? What was vacation time like? Like, how did HR play a role in this?
They just stood there and dropped their heads. The HR director literally stood there and dropped his head. He literally stood there and dropped his head.
Wow.
I looked at him, and he just, with his hands in his pocket, and dropped his head.
Yeah, rightfully so. So earlier we learned, like, with the standard, you have ad hoc. That means it's kind of in people's minds, but people don't really have a policy written down. And so it sounds like that's what your work from home policy was. And I just wanted to confirm that. Was it really based on your leader at the time just allowing this flexibility, or was there really a policy?
There was no policy in place, and my leader was allowing it. And what was interesting, that they had literally just hired a new SVP to design a work from home policy. Because she just came on board probably 3 or 4 months prior. And I remember meeting her in the cafe one day talking, because she was a very fashionably dressed lady. And we would always talk about fashion, and we were just talking. And she said, oh yeah, they hired me to design a work from home policy, because we have a lot of positions that we're trying to figure out which positions can be work from home, because they were identifying how a lot of millennials they couldn't fill a lot of positions, because millennials were literally saying, we're not coming into the office.
Listen.
We're not working 5 days a week. We'll only do 2 days a week. And I remember that was the conversation. This was before COVID. Y'all. And I remember that being a conversation, and I remember when that manager told me that, she's like, "Oh, we'll never have a work from home policy," and that was in 2019, and right after that, COVID hit, and we know what happened after COVID. So yeah.
So for those of you who are listening, and if you're leaders, one thing you can take away from this, and one thing I would take away from this if I was going into an organization, a lot of times leaders do things just to be kind, right? And we love that. Yes, try to do the right thing for your team, but as you're doing the right thing, find a way to formalize that right thing. Because if you don't have a policy, either it could be looked at as favoritism somewhere down the road. You did that for Carla and not for me because fill in the blank, and the blank could be any protected category, or same thing that happened to you, no one's complaining, but now you have new leadership and that same dynamic isn't continuing because it's not formalized. So making things a policy or putting it in writing can really help people in the long run. Okay, so walk in, 6 month severance, you say, I'm not doing it, walk out. What happens next?
Well, I had a friend who's an attorney, and I knew what I was going to do. As they were telling me, as they were giving me the paperwork, it was plain in my mind. I had a strategy. I'm like, oh, I know what I'm going to do. Because I know what they do. I know their strategy. I've worked with the employment attorney for the last 2.5 years. I know what they do. I know what I'm going to do. So I'm calling the EEOC. I'm going to give them 30 days to meet my demands. And if they don't meet my demands, we're calling the EEOC.
What were your demands?
We had some demands. Some financial demands.
Got it.
And it wasn't 6 month severance.
Yes, ma'am. Yep. So these mistakes that we make, whether intended or not intended, has a financial impact to it, right? But what we also forget that it's people's lives attached to our mistakes. So I want to pause for a second from like the process behind it, because I want to get into like some of the documentation that you said you were notating things. So what were you notating? But while all this was going on, you had just had a mom who was diagnosed with breast cancer. You have a daughter who's diagnosed with autism. Now your job is in jeopardy. How are you feeling? Like, what are you going through mentally and emotionally while all of this is happening?
Well, I'm grateful that I have had a spouse who had a job. I didn't feel like I had to live paycheck to paycheck. So I had a little money saved in the bank. So I wasn't stressed. I was a little disappointed because I did like my job. I liked my coworkers. I felt like I was going to lose relationships with people that I worked with every day, because it is different, because you can't talk to those people every day, because it's different, you know. The relationships that I had every day, they're different, you know, because, you know, people work and they get different, they get funny, you know, because they got to protect their jobs, because they can't talk to you every day because they're trying to protect their jobs, so they're not going to talk to you every day. So that part was a little uncomfortable, but financially I was okay, because, you know, I have a spouse who, you know, made sure everything was good. But mentally I was okay, because I knew what I was gonna do. I knew that I had been discriminated against. I knew how they operated. I knew without a shadow of a doubt how they managed certain things, because I had seen the behind the scenes. And I knew what I could tell an attorney, and I knew that they could not argue it. I knew that. I had facts to back me up. And I knew that once I filed my claim with the EEOC, that they would have to prove what I was saying was not true. And I knew that they could not. So it was gonna be again, they would have to prove that I was lying, and I knew that they couldn't. And that was it.
And I don't know if you can share all of it, some of it, none of it, but what were some of those facts you presented?
I knew that they had a history of discriminating against people.
Okay, so I'm gonna pause there. The history part gets people in trouble a lot. So perfect example, I just closed a ageism case for non-selection. That means somebody wasn't selected for a promotion because of age, right? Yes, it could have been prevented, but one thing I had to do was pull 2 years worth of data from that person who selected the individual. So the history part, people forget what they did 5 years ago, but the EEOC gonna clearly figure out what you did 5 years ago. So we must operate in a manner that is of excellence, but also keeping in mind our decisions are documented somewhere, and someone at any time can pull them. So they had a history of discrimination. Now my question to you is, do you feel like you were discriminated against because of ADA? So because of having a child with a disability, because you're a woman, because you're Black, like you hold many identities. So what played a role in the discrimination for you?
All of it.
Tell me more.
I felt like I knew that being a woman, there were several women that had been discriminated against. I felt like my child had been discriminated against, and I went there, and I made them prove that I was lying, and they couldn't.
Got it. So you had the history of discrimination. What else?
I made them prove that they did not discriminate against my child, and they couldn't.
Got it. So they couldn't. Fast forward. What happens next?
I gave them 30 days to respond to my demand, and I had my attorney send them a demand letter. And what was interesting, I had my attorney send the president of the company a letter, and they asked me not to file with the EEOC, and she told them, "I think you're late." She said, "I think you're a little too late." She's already done that, because I knew they didn't want me. They didn't want it on record, and she told them, "You got 30 days to respond. If you don't respond in 30 days, she filed with the EEOC," and they didn't respond. And then they wanted to mediate. They wanted to go to mediation.
Okay.
and that was my thing. If I filed with EEOC, then they gonna want to go to mediation quick. So we went to mediation, and when we got to mediation, they came with a certain amount, and I said no.
Yes.
Absolutely no. Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Very good.
Absolutely not. And then the deputy, well, I'm not gonna say his name, but the attorney that they wouldn't send the employment attorney because she and I used to work together.
Oh.
And it was.
This is getting better.
It was
and
hilarious.
better.
We were like this. I used to write the severance agreements for her.
Right.
And they were like, and I came with my demand, and they said, "Carla, how do you know? Why are you asking for this amount?" And I said, well, you just paid this person this amount. And they said, "How do you know we paid that person that amount?" I said, "Well, I wrote the agreement." And he said, what was funny, he didn't know that I wrote the agreement. He said, "You wrote the agreement?" I thought she wrote the agreement. I said, "No, I wrote the agreement." And I was like, "I wrote the agreement." And I said, "You gave her that?" I said, "Are you giving her that because she's a white woman and I'm a Black woman? You only want to offer me this?" We're having a problem. And he was like, "Well, this person only authorized me to give you this." I said, "Well, you need to tell him I'm only accepting this. You can give it to me today, or we can go to court. I don't have a job. All I have is time. So it's up to you."
Oh, can we clap it up, please?
I don't have, and I stood on that. I mean, what were we gonna do?
Oh, the young kids would say you stood on business.
I stood on business. I mean, you've already fired me. You've already fired me. I mean, what else can we do?
So the way you advocated for yourself was incredibly admirable, and studies show that women don't always do that, right? And the more intersectionality we have as women, the more we don't advocate for ourselves. It shows in the pay disparities, it shows in promotional disparities, it shows, right? Lean In just did a report on it. So, like, how did you learn how to advocate for yourself in that manner?
The reality is, I just happened to have the inside information that nobody else knew. The average person wouldn't have known that much information. I mean, I'm fortunate that I worked in that particular legal department, and I saw information that the average person would not have seen. That really is the benefit that I had. I mean, I can honestly say, had I not seen that, I would not have known to stand on that. Had I not seen that they had paid somebody else that much money, I wouldn't have known to ask for that. I would have taken what they offered.
Got it. That's good to know. Okay, so you got your money.
I got my money.
And
I got it.
You got your money. But life is still in session, right?
Yeah.
As that's going on, you have home going on. And so what happens after all of that is settled? You know, I forgot to ask you, did they ever offer accommodations, any type of accommodation during that process?
No.
Got it. Okay.
No.
Good to know. Always offer an accommodation, okay, everybody? Okay, so got your money. What happens next in life?
What happens next in life? I wrote a book.
Yeah, that's the part I wanted to get to. Tell us about the book.
Yeah, I flipped it on them. I took some time. I've been thinking about, I never really thought about writing a book, honestly. I didn't even consider myself a writer. My husband has the English degree, and he likes to write, and he's a former educator. I thought about, my daughter, who is autistic. I thought about, my little cousins who always would say, Camille won't talk to us. She won't share her snacks. She won't share her toys, and she won't do this. She won't do that. And I started thinking about how to explain autism to little kids, and what did autism look like for her. And we were looking for books to really explain what autism looked like for a little black girl, and we didn't really see any books, honestly, that represented a little black girl. And so I said, well, what would be the answer to that? And we saw books that had little boys on them, mostly books that had little white boys, and so we came up with the idea of a little black girl who was a superhero, Ausome Girl. Just like Clark Kent is Superman, Carla Moultrie turns into Ausome Girl, who is a superhero. It talks about her challenges that she has with autism, but it also talks about her strengths, which are her superpowers, her strengths, and that helps her with her autism. So, yes, that's what we did. I took some time and came up with this amazing book that helps children understand what autism is and what it is not. And it has been received by school districts across the country, and we're doing some amazing things with Ausome Girl. We're in talks with production studios to possibly make it into either a sitcom or a cartoon. Y'all just watch out now, because hey, y'all gonna say, I know her.
Right.
I know her. So hey, we're doing some major things with Ausome Girl.
Were there any lessons you took from that experience that help you in your current experience?
Yes, my current experience now, I work still 9 to 5. Ausome Girl didn't quite pay the bills yet, but I work currently for GE. I work for an amazing employer. I'm grateful. During the day, I work from home right now, and my current employer, and shout out to UGA. I just got my MBA from UGA. Yes, go dogs.
Woo, woo. Did I get it?
When I was applying for my current job, the career advisor told me that I published a book about autism on my resume, and I was really apprehensive about doing it because being discriminated against by an employer, you don't want to put that on you. I didn't want to put that on my resume, but the career advisor really advised me to do it, and my manager wanted to interview me specifically because of the book. And I thought she wanted to talk about been a published writer. And that's what because, being a contracts manager, I'm thinking she wanted to talk about my writing skills. That's what I was thinking. I'm trying to make it make sense. Like, oh, she's a contracts person, legal writing. That's what I was really trying to think. But she has a child with neurological issues, and that really touched her. And shortly after I came on board, she was like, "Do you mind if I talk to you about?" She was like, "I'm crossing lines. Please tell me if this is issue for you. But I have a child with severe ADHD, and her doctor wants to put her on medicine. Did you put your daughter on medicine? Can I talk to you about that?" And we really had a very open and transparent conversation about ADHD, because my daughter also has ADHD. And she was like, "I just want to be open and honest about it. And, some days she has to leave work and, go to the school and talk about it and, deal with school stuff." And she was like, she's like, "Sometimes I'm going to be away for a couple hours. I won't be available." She's like, "Just text me." And I'm like, same here. If I got to go to the school, like the understanding, the empathy that, a parent, with a child with disabilities, I'm so grateful that I have an employer that gets it. If I got to step away for a couple hours, or, ain't nobody blowing up my phone, and, the yellow light is on, nobody mad, nobody gonna have a heart attack. And so that situation, it's working for me.
What would have made you feel like your previous employer got it?
My previous employer?
Mm-hmm.
Just empathy.
Okay.
Just empathy, and compassion.
Yeah.
And what's so interesting, my previous employer, her son was autistic. But she had a nanny. She had a nanny, and her husband is a big-time attorney, partner of a big firm here in Atlanta. You wouldn't know it, though. I mean, they lived completely different lives, but completely different. High-functioning son with autistic. Thank you. I have some I was going to give away, but thank you for it.
Yay! So life sounds amazing. Sounds like you had some incredible learning moments.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like you have a leader that is empathetic and compassionate. And someone might ask, like, how can you teach that? You can. You can teach leaders. You can coach leaders on how to be compassionate and empathetic, because when you're not, you can get EEOC claims, right? So when I talked about reverse engineering and say what could have prevented this, compassion and empathy is typically at the bedrock of it. You got your MBA. You're out here talking to different production agencies. You have a daughter with autism. You're selling books. Like you're working a 9 to 5. Like you're doing all of these things. So, what does your self-care look like to manage it all?
I'm grateful to have time for myself, because I have a pretty good system where I have a sister who lives here locally. She is amazing. She's always willing to step in, and almost every other weekend she's like, "I'm coming to get Camille." I mean, because and Camille can be a handful. I mean, she's very bright, and she's a handful. She comes and get her almost every Friday, and she keeps her every Sunday to give me and my husband just time off. So that gives us time to do whatever we want for date nights or just whatever we want to do. And we're trying to make sure we at least try to do something, go out of town, because most of those every other Friday nights that when we do those date nights, we usually just stay home and watch TV. Like literally, it's just like, let's watch Netflix and go to sleep. Literally, that's usually what we're doing. But I like to go over to Lenox Mall over there and do some retail therapy. I have habits. But that's usually what I do. Shop. That's what most women like to do. Yeah, that's.
Thank you for that. I have one last question, and then want you to please just talk about your book a little bit more so people can support. For those leaders out there who have to support employees who are parents that have kids with autism, like, what do you want them to know so they can operate better in compassion and empathy?
What I really want leaders to understand is that a parent who is caring for a child with special needs, any type of special need, really listen to them, because it looks different. It really, really does look different for them. I know for me, as a parent with special needs, listen to them and be compassionate, because don't think that they're making excuses. Because I know a lot of times people think that parents with kids with special needs are using their child's disability as an excuse. A lot of times they think, especially with autism is very unpredictable. It is very unpredictable. Your child can be having an amazing day, amazing week, an amazing month, and then they can just totally change. I know, like my daughter, I remember when she was first diagnosed with autism, she went months just sleeping really well, and then her sleep pattern got off, and she would be up all night, literally all night. I mean, up all night, and then you have to get back, try to get the sleep pattern back on. And then there'd be days she would, and I remember we didn't even know that she was sleeping all day in school. We did not know. And then finally her teacher was like, yeah, she's, and we would just let her sleep. I'm like, y'all just let her sleep. Like, that's not going to do her any good. She's not learning anything if you're letting her sleep. And this went on for like 2 or 3 weeks. And then and that's when we decided on medicine. We did not know she was sleeping through the day. So we like, no, we need to put her on something so she can sleep all the way through the night, so she can focus, so she can be awake to focus during the day. And we were totally against medicine, because, they tell you don't put your child on medicine, because, that's like crack cocaine, and it's like, and it's not. We had to make sure she was on the right dosages, so she can, be focused during the day. And now she's a straight A student. So we had to, so we weren't afraid. We weren't afraid to try what needed to work for our child. So be empathetic, listen to your coworker, your employees, and work with them. So that's what I would say.
Wow. Thank you so very much, because as we talked about today, like, there's a cost associated with not being empathetic and not being compassionate and not understanding the law and how it applies, and FMLA and intermittent leave and ADA and all of those things. But just thank you so much for sharing your story, because you humanize what a process can be, and just reminding people there is a face, there's a family, there are children attached to your decisions as a leader and as an organization. So just thank you, and keep killing it, because you are doing the thing, okay? Thank you so much.